She fought monsters at dawn, yet the classroom fell silent when she walked in Part 1, The Wait Before Sunrise. The fog rolled through the ruins of old Seattle like a living thing. Cold and hungry and patient Lieutenant Commander Sarah Vance stood in the middle of what had once been a shopping district, her boots planted in ash and broken concrete, her tactical suit torn across the shoulder, where the creature had nearly taken her arm. The wraith lay dead at her feet, or whatever passed for dead when you killed something that existed in more than 3 dimensions at once. Its body was already dissolving, fading back into whatever nightmare realm it had crawled from when the sun began to rise behind her. Private Chun was helping Corporal Rodriguez to his feet, and Sergeant Williams was wrapping a field bandage around her own leg with hands that did not shake because shaking was a luxury. None of them could afford 6 soldiers had walked into the ruins. At 0400 hours, 6 soldiers were walking out. That was a good day by frontier defense standards. Sarah wiped the blood from her face with the back of her hand and checked her chronometer. 0457. Dimensional barriers would stabilize in another 20 minutes as the sun climbed higher, and the wraiths would retreat to wherever they went when the light grew too strong for them to maintain their grip on reality. They had survived another dawn, Commander Williams said, limping up beside her. Martinez is down bad. Internal bleeding, I think. She needs evac now. Sarah looked to where Private Martinez lay propped against a crumbling wall, her face gray and her breathing shallow. The extraction point was 3 kilometers north through unstable terrain. Martinez would not make it walking. I have her, Sarah said. She crossed to Martinez and knelt beside her, checking her vitals with quick practiced hands before lifting the younger woman onto her back in a fireman's carry. Martinez weighed maybe 60 kilos with her gear, and Sarah had carried heavier loads across worse ground. Move out, she ordered, and her team fell into formation around her as they began the long walk home, 3 kilometers through the bones of a dead city, while the sun rose slow and red over the mountains, and somewhere in the distance, another wraith howled its frustration at the coming light. Sarah did not look back. She had stopped looking back years ago. Transport was waiting at the extraction point, and the medics took Martinez from her arms with the efficiency of people who had done this too many times before. Sarah stood on the landing pad and watched the city burn in the dawnlight, fires still smoldering from the night's battle, smoke rising to meet the clouds. 12 years she had been doing this, 12 years of walking into the darkness before sunrise and fighting things that should not exist so that the people sleeping in the protected zones could wake up and drink their coffee and complain about the weather without ever knowing what waited for them in the spaces between worlds. Her hands were shaking now. She shoved them into her pockets and turned away from the city. Commander Vance. She recognized the voice and did not particularly want to respond to it, but military discipline won out over personal preference. Colonel Harrison, she said, turning to face the older man who had approached from the command tent. Harrison was career military, desk-bound for the last decade. Soft in the middle, but sharp in the eyes, he was holding a data tablet and wearing an expression that Sarah had learned to associate with bad news. Walk with me, he said. They walked along the perimeter of the camp, past soldiers cleaning weapons and medics, treating wounds and technicians, calibrating equipment for the next night's patrol. Harrison did not speak for a long time, and Sarah did not fill the silence. You have been reassigned, he finally said. To which unit? Not a unit, Harrison said, and something in his voice made her stop walking. The Concord Academy on Axiom Prime. You are to serve as Earth's cultural representative to the coalition species. Sarah stared at him. That is a joke. It is not. I am a combat officer. I kill wraiths. I do not attend diplomatic functions and make small talk with aliens. You do now, Harrison said. And there was something almost like sympathy in his face. Orders came from the top, Vance. Earth needs representation at the Academy and Command. Has decided that representation should be you. Why me? Because you are exactly what they need to see, Harrison said. The Concord thinks humans are fragile and primitive and forgettable. They think we are a minor species that will burn out in a few centuries and leave nothing behind. Command wants to change that perception. So they are sending a soldier to a school. They are sending our best soldier to the most prestigious institution in the galaxy, Harrison corrected her. What you do with that opportunity is up to you. Sarah wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him that she was needed here, that every night brought new incursions and every dawn demanded its blood, price, and that she could not simply walk away from the war she had been fighting since. She was barely more than a child herself, but she had been a soldier long enough to know when orders were not negotiable. When do I leave? She asked. Tomorrow morning. Transport is already arranged. She nodded once, sharply, and walked away before she could say something that would get her court-martialed that night. She did not sleep. She sat on the edge of her bunk and cleaned her weapons with hands that had finally stopped shaking. And she thought about the creatures that would come with the dawn and the soldiers who would face them without her. She thought about the Academy and the aliens who would look at her and see nothing but a primitive from a primitive world. She thought about 12 years of blood and fire, and the friends she had buried, and the ones she had carried home at 0300 hours. Her personal communicator chimed with an incoming message. The sender was blocked. The encryption military grade opened it anyway. The message was short. Just 3 lines from someone she had served with years ago. Someone who now worked in places that officially did not exist. They are watching you specifically. Be careful what you show them and what you hide. Sarah read the message twice, then deleted it from her device and wiped the memory cache. She stood and walked to the window and watched the darkness beyond the perimeter lights, where the barriers between worlds grew thin and hungry things waited for the sun to rise. Tomorrow she would board a transport and leave Earth behind. Tomorrow she would walk into a different kind of battle, one fought with words and perceptions and the slow grinding machinery of galactic politics. But tonight the monsters were coming, and she had one more dawn to face before she went. She fought monsters at dawn, yet the classroom fell silent when she walked in. Part 2. The silence of Predator's Axiom Prime was nothing like Earth. The station hung in the void between 3 star systems, a massive construct of metal and glass and technology that humanity could barely comprehend, let alone replicate. Sarah stepped off the transport and into a world of towering crystalline spires and floating platforms and aliens of every shape and size imaginable moving through corridors that seemed to shift and change according to some pattern she could not understand. She had been given a uniform for her new role, dark blue with silver trim and the Earth Alliance insignia on her shoulder. It felt wrong against her skin, too clean and too new, and too far removed from the tactical gear that had been her second skin for over a decade. A guide droid led her through the station to the Academy complex, narrating as they walked in a pleasant synthetic voice that Sarah tuned out almost immediately. She was too busy watching the aliens who passed her with curious glances or dismissive sneers, watching the way they moved, cataloging threats and exits and tactical positions out of pure habit, watching everything because that was what soldiers did when they entered unfamiliar territory. The Academy itself was beautiful in a cold and intimidating way, all soaring architecture and impossible geometry, and the weight of centuries of tradition pressing down from every direction. Sarah had faced monsters that could tear through steel with their claws. She had never felt as out of place as she did walking through those doors. Her first class was called Advanced Interspecies Conflict Resolution, and the door opened to reveal a circular room with tiered seating and a central platform where the instructor stood. 47. Aliens turned to look at her as she entered, and the room went silent, not quiet. Not hushed, but absolutely and completely silent in a way that felt like a physical pressure against her skin. Sarah had experienced this before. The silence of predators recognizing something unexpected in their midst. She walked down the aisle to the only empty seat, and she felt their eyes on her. The whole way a massive creature of living crystal sat to her left, easily 7 feet tall, even seated, its body catching the light and scattering it into rainbows across the walls too. Her right was something that looked like an insect the size of a large dog, with compound eyes that reflected her face in 1,000 tiny fragments. The crystal being spoke first, its voice like wind chimes in a storm. "So this is the human representative," it said, and there was contempt in every syllable. "I had expected something more substantial." Sarah met its eyes, or what she assumed were its eyes, and did not respond. She had learned long ago that silence was its own kind of weapon. Instructor was an ancient being called a Mendari, thin and ethereal, and seemingly made of light and shadow woven together in ways that hurt to look at directly. Professor Aldrin So, according to her briefing materials, one of the oldest and most respected scholars in the Concord. "We have a new student joining us today," Professor So said, his voice carrying easily through the room, despite its softness. "Lieutenant Commander Sarah Vance of Earth. Please make her welcome." Nobody made her welcome. The class began, and Sarah quickly realized that she was operating at a significant disadvantage. These students had been studying galactic politics and military theory for decades, some of them for centuries. They spoke of historical conflicts and diplomatic frameworks and strategic doctrines with the ease of long familiarity. Sarah listened and learned and said nothing until Professor So presented a scenario. "Colony world is under attack by raiders," he said, projecting images onto the central display. "They have taken hostages and fortified the main settlement. You have limited military resources and a strict timeline before the hostages are executed. What do you do?" The crystal being, whose name was Thessaly Verkith, according to the class roster, spoke first. He proposed a complex negotiation strategy involving resource trades and political concessions that would take months to implement. The insectoid beside her, Kira 7 Rings, suggested a coordinated evacuation of surrounding settlements to deny the raiders additional targets while awaiting reinforcements. Others offered variations on these themes, all of them elegant and sophisticated and fundamentally disconnected from the reality. Sarah knew. "Lieutenant Commander Vance," Professor So said, turning those ancient eyes toward her, "you have been silent. Do you have nothing to contribute?" Sarah considered her words carefully. "The negotiation strategy fails because it assumes the raiders want resources," she said, her voice flat and calm. "Raiders who take hostages want fear. They want the colony to know it is not protected. Giving them what they ask for only proves that point." Thessaly Verkith shifted. "Crystal grinding against crystal, and the evacuation strategy assumes you have time to move populations. But you do not. The timeline is strict and evacuation routes can be monitored. You would be trading one set of hostages for another." She stood and walked to the central display, pointing to specific locations on the projected map. "The raiders have fortified here, here and here. Standard defensive positions, but they have made a mistake. They are relying on the colony's own infrastructure for power and communications. Cut those lines at these junction points and you blind them. Then you go in through the water treatment facility, which they have not bothered to secure because it is beneath their notice." The room was silent again. The assault team needs to be small. No more than 6 operators, moving fast and quiet and willing to do whatever is necessary. You engage the perimeter guards silently. You reach the hostage location before the raiders know you are there, and you end the threat with overwhelming violence in a space of seconds. She looked around at the assembled students. It is not elegant. It is not sophisticated, but it works. The hostages go home and the raiders do not. And if the assault fails, Thessaly demanded. If your operators are killed, Sira met his crystalline gaze without flinching. Then they die doing their job. That is what soldiers do. The silence stretched for a long moment. Interesting, Professor So said finally. And how many times have you executed operations like this? Lieutenant Commander, Sira returned to her seat. I stopped counting after the first 100. The class continued. But something had changed. The other students looked at her differently now. Not with contempt, but with something else. Something that might have been caution, or might have been the beginning of respect after class. Professor So stopped her at the door. You did not learn that from textbooks, he said. Sira looked at the ancient being, at the weight of centuries in those impossible eyes. No, sir, she said. I learned it at dawn. When the monsters come, and the only thing between them and the people I protect is me and whatever weapons I can carry. Professor So studied her for a long moment. I think you will find that there are many kinds of monsters in this galaxy, Lieutenant Commander, and not all of them can be killed with weapons. He turned and walked away, leaving Sira alone in the empty classroom. She thought about his words as she made her way back to her quarters. She thought about the silence that had fallen when she entered the room, and she wondered what exactly Earth had sent her here to do. She fought monsters at dawn, yet the classroom fell silent. When she walked in Part 3, what humans hide 3 weeks at the Academy in Sarah had become something of an uncomfortable mystery. The other students did not know what to make of her. She was not aggressive like the warrior species who strutted through the corridors, displaying their strength. She was not cunning like the merchant races who turned every conversation into a negotiation. She was not serene like the elder civilizations who had seen empires rise and fall and considered everything beneath their notice. She was something else, entirely something that made the predator-descended species check their exits when she entered a room, something that made even the oldest students fall quiet. When she spoke in class, Sira noticed these things, but did not particularly care about them. She attended her classes and completed her assignments and spent her evenings in the station's training facilities running combat drills. That left the other users staring and uncomfortable. Silence she was not here to make. Friends, she was here because her government had ordered her to be here, and she would do her duty as she always had. But duty did not mean she had to enjoy it. The training accident happened on a Thursday. Professor So had arranged a practical exercise in one of the Academy's simulation chambers, a massive room capable of projecting realistic holographic environments for educational purposes. The scenario was supposed to be a simple diplomatic negotiation with environmental complications. Nothing dangerous, just challenging enough to test the student's ability to think under pressure. Sira had been excused from the exercise because the scenario involved species-specific cultural elements that did not apply to humans. She was in the observation gallery when the alarm started screaming. Something had gone wrong with the simulation. The safety protocols had failed, and the environmental hazards were no longer holographic inside the chamber. 12 students were trapped in a scenario that was rapidly becoming lethal. Sira watched the chaos unfold on the monitor. She watched the station's emergency response team scramble for equipment. She listened to someone say that rescue was 20 minutes away. Minutes was too long. She was moving before she consciously decided to move. Running through corridors she had memorized in her first week, pushing past confused staff and panicked bystanders until she reached the chamber's emergency access hatch. The heat hit her first. When she forced the door open, The simulation had manifested some kind of volcanic environment, and the temperature inside was climbing toward levels that would kill most species in minutes. Sarah did not hesitate. She pulled her jacket over her nose and mouth and went in. The first student she found was Kira 7 Rings. The insectoid who sat beside her in class. Kira was curled into a ball on a narrow ledge, her compound eyes wide with terror, her chitinous body trembling so hard that Sarah could hear the plates clicking against each other. "Kira," Sarah said, kneeling beside her. "Kira, I need you to listen to me." "Cannot move," Kira whispered, her voice a high, thin whine. "Cannot think, too hot. The hive mind is screaming." "Then do not listen to the hive mind," Sarah said, taking the insectoid's forelimbs in her hands. "Listen to me. Just me. Breathe with me." She taught Kira through a breathing exercise, simple in-out patterns that she had learned from a therapist years ago. And slowly the trembling eased. "There are others," Kira said. "I know. Can you move now?" "I can try." Sarah helped her up, and they moved deeper into the simulation. They found 3 more students huddled together near what had been an emergency exit before a rock slide blocked it. Sarah organized them into a group and started leading them toward an alternate route she had spotted on the chamber's architectural plans. That was when she heard Thessaly Verkith screaming. The crystal being had fallen through a weakened floor section into a lower chamber. He was badly damaged, cracks running through his crystalline structure, and he was too heavy and too injured to climb out on his own. Sarah did not hesitate. She jumped down after him. "Human, what are you doing?" Thessaly demanded, his voice fractured with pain. "Getting you out of here. I am 3 times your mass. You cannot lift me. Watch me." She found handholds in the broken floor above them and began to climb, hauling Thessaly's weight with her through sheer force of will. Her arms burned and her back screamed, and somewhere in the middle of the climb she felt something in her left arm snap with a wet cracking sound that meant she had broken bones. She did not stop. She got Thessaly to the upper level and helped him onto his feet and kept the group moving toward the exit. The plasma vent caught her by surprise. It erupted from the floor directly in her path. Superheated gas that would have killed Kira instantly if it touched her. Sarah threw herself in front of it. She felt the burn across her back, felt her skin blistering and splitting, felt pain like nothing she had experienced since her first Wraith encounter years ago. She stayed on her feet. She found the emergency release for the plasma conduit and disabled it with her bare hands, which meant more burns and more pain and more damage that her body would carry for the rest of her life. When the rescue teams finally arrived, they found Sarah sitting with the survivors in a relatively safe corner of the chamber. Her arm was broken in 2 places. Her back was a ruin of burns, and she was calmly teaching Kira a human meditation technique for managing overwhelming sensory input. "Why?" Thessaly asked later in the medical bay, his crystal body slowly knitting itself back together. "Why would you do that? The Varath do not carry our wounded. It is considered weakness. Why would a human risk death for strangers?" Sarah looked at him with her one good eye, the other swollen shut from the heat. "Because you were scared," she said simply. "And I was not." That night, alone in her quarters, Kira 7 Rings accessed the classified databases that her hive mind connections allowed her to reach. She found Sarah's service record. She read about 847 confirmed Wraith engagements over 12 years. She read about the survival rates for Frontier Defense Corps units, numbers so low that they would be considered unacceptable casualties for any other species. She read about commendations for actions that no sane being would have attempted again and again and again. A career built on walking toward things that any reasonable creature would run from. She read about the friends Sarah had lost and the soldiers she had carried home and the endless grinding toll of a war that humanity fought every single dawn, and she understood something that changed everything. She thought she knew about the small, fragile, short-lived species called humans. They were not weak, because they died so easily. They were terrifying, because they kept fighting anyway. Kira saved the file and closed her connection to the database tomorrow. She would save Sarah's receiving class tomorrow. She would begin to understand what it meant to burn so bright. In such a brief span of years, tomorrow everything would be different. She fought monsters at dawn, yet the classroom fell silent. When she walked in Part 5, What Humanity Means, the investigation took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of interviews and evidence analysis and increasingly uncomfortable questions about how wraiths had appeared in a location where they should never have been able to manifest. Sarah spent most of that time in medical recovery, her body slowly knitting itself back together while the galaxy's most powerful beings argued about what had happened and what it meant. The answer, when it finally came, was worse than anyone had expected. Someone had brought the wraiths to Axiom Prime. Someone had deliberately created an unstable dimensional breach in the station's outer ring, had drawn the creatures through from wherever they originated, had watched as monsters slaughtered innocent beings in the corridors of the galaxy's most prestigious institution. The culprits were a faction within the Concord itself, a group of elder species who had grown concerned about humanity's presence in galactic affairs, who saw the young, aggressive, short-lived beings from a small blue world as a threat to the established order. They had wanted to test humanity's representative. They had wanted to see what she would do when the monsters came. They had gotten their answer. The Concord Council convened an emergency session to address the attack and its implications. Sarah was called to testify. She stood before the assembled representatives of 200 species, still bearing visible wounds from the battle, and she waited for them to ask their questions. The council speaker was a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline matrix, ancient beyond human comprehension, its voice resonating through the chamber like thunder. Lieutenant Commander Vance, it said, you have been called before this council to explain your actions during the recent crisis, and to speak on behalf of your species regarding humanity's place in the Concord. Sarah had prepared no speech. She had no grand statements or diplomatic rhetoric or carefully crafted arguments. She had only the truth. What would you have the council understand about humanity? The speaker asked. Sarah looked down at the assembled beings, at creatures of light and crystal and chitin and forms she did not have names for, at species who had been old when humanity's ancestors were still learning to walk upright. You think we are fragile, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. You think we are primitive and aggressive and too short-lived to matter. You think that we will burn out in a few centuries and leave nothing behind but ruins and legends. She paused, gathering her thoughts. You are wrong. A murmur ran through the council. Surprise and offense and curiosity all mixed together. We are not the strongest species in this galaxy, Sarah continued. We are not the smartest or the oldest or the wisest. We cannot live for centuries like the Varath or share thoughts like the Cathri or bend space like the Mendari. We are small and fragile, and we die so easily that most of you cannot even comprehend how we continue to exist. She thought about the soldiers she had served with, the ones who had fallen and the ones who had carried on. But we are the ones who show up. When the monsters come, we do not run, we do not hide, we do not wait for someone else to solve the problem. We pick up whatever weapons we can find, and we walk toward the screaming, and we fight until we cannot fight anymore. And then we get back up and we keep fighting. The council was silent now. Truly silent, hundreds of beings holding their breath as a single human spoke. You wanted to test me, Sarah said. looking directly at the faction that had orchestrated the attack. You wanted to see what humanity would do when faced with the impossible. You wanted to know if we were a threat to your comfortable order. Here is your answer. We are not a threat to you. We are a promise that when the darkness comes, when the monsters crawl out of whatever pit spawned them, when everything seems lost and hopeless and beyond saving, there will be someone standing between the innocent and the thing that wants to hurt them. That is what humanity means. We are the ones who do not look away. We are the ones who do not count the cost. We are the ones who will burn ourselves to ash if that is what it takes to keep the light alive for one more day. You can accept us or you can reject us. You can give us a seat at your table or you can try to destroy us. It does not matter. We will still show up. We will still fight, because that is who we are. She stopped speaking and waited. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then the council voted. It was not unanimous. It never was, with so many species and so many competing interests. But the margin was decisive. Humanity was granted full membership in the Galactic Concord, not because they had proved themselves civilized, not because they had demonstrated their value through diplomacy or trade or cultural achievement, because they had proved themselves necessary. Because when the monsters came, humans did not run. The academy reopened. 1 week later, Sarah walked into her classroom on the first day back, and the room fell silent, but it was a different silence than before. Not confusion or contempt or cautious assessment. Respect. 7 rings had saved her a seat in the front row. Her compound eyes bright with something that looked like joy. Thessaly Virkith inclined his crystal head in formal acknowledgement as she passed, a gesture of honor among his people. Even Professor So's ancient eyes held something like warmth as she took her place. Welcome back, Lieutenant Commander, he said. Sarah nodded and pulled out her datapad and got back to work. She was still a soldier. She would always be a soldier. But now she was something else too. She was proof of what humanity could be. She was a promise kept in blood and fire and stubborn refusal to surrender. She was the answer to a question the galaxy had not known it was asking. And somewhere, on a small blue world spinning around an ordinary star, the sun was rising, and humanity's soldiers were already walking toward it as they always had, as they always would, until the last dawn came, and the last monster fell, and the light finally won. She fought monsters at dawn, yet the classroom fell silent when she walked in. Part 4. The monsters. We become. The attack came without warning. 1 moment. Axiom Prime was humming along in its eternal routine of diplomacy and education and the careful dance of galactic politics. The next moment, reality itself tore open in the station's outer ring, and something impossible came through. Sarah felt it before the alarm started. She felt that familiar wrongness in her bones, that sick twisting sensation that meant the barriers between dimensions were breaking down. That meant something was coming through from the other side. She was out of bed and reaching for weapons that were not there before she was fully awake. The wraiths should not have been here. They had never manifested outside Earth's system, had never appeared anywhere except in the thin places where humanity's homeworld touched whatever nightmare realm spawned them. But the screaming that echoed through the station's corridors was unmistakable. Sarah knew that sound. She had been hearing it in her nightmares. For 12 years she moved through the Academy complex toward the sounds of chaos, her bare feet silent on the cold floor, her mind already calculating distances and threat assessments and tactical options. The other students were panicking. She passed Vorath warriors frozen in confusion, Kethri Hive daughters huddled together, broadcasting terror through their neural links, elder species who had lived for centuries standing helpless before something they had never imagined. None of them had ever faced a wraith, none of them knew what to do. Sarah did. She found a security station that had been abandoned when its occupants fled and broke into the weapons locker with a technique she had learned in her first year of military training. The weapons were wrong, designed for threats that existed fully in normal space. But they would have to do. She grabbed a plasma rifle and 2 sidearms and as many power cells as she could carry. Then, she went hunting. The first wraith she encountered was a Category 2. Smaller than the beasts she usually fought, but faster and more vicious. It was feeding on a group of students who had tried to barricade themselves in a classroom, their fear drawing it like blood in water. Sarah did not announce herself. She simply fired. The plasma bolts tore through the creature's semi-corporeal form, disrupting its connection to reality. And it turned toward her with a shriek that existed in frequencies that should not have been audible. She kept firing. She did not stop until the thing dissolved into mist and the students behind the barricade were staring at her with expressions of pure incomprehension. "Move," she told them. "Toward the central hub. Stay together. Do not stop for anything." They ran. Sarah went the other direction, toward the outer ring where the dimensional tier was still bleeding monsters into the station. She killed 2 more Category Es on the way. She found station security making a stand at a major intersection, their weapons barely effective against creatures that existed partially outside normal physics. Half of them were already dead. She joined their line without a word and started directing fire, showing them where to aim, how to predict the creature's movements, how to exploit the brief moments when they manifested fully enough to be vulnerable. It was not enough. The security forces were taking too many casualties, and the wraiths kept coming, and somewhere behind her she could hear the screams of civilians who had not reached safety in time. Then she heard something worse, a roar that shook the walls and made even the lesser wraiths pause in their feeding. Category E. Big one came through the dimensional tier like a nightmare-given flesh, towering over the corridor, its form constantly shifting between states of matter that hurt to look at directly. Sarah had killed Category 3s before, but never alone. Never without her squad. Never without the specialized weapons that humanity had developed specifically for hunting. These things. She looked at the creature, and the creature looked at her. And in that moment something passed between them. Recognition. The wraith knew what she was, and it was afraid. "Everyone fall back," Sarah said, her voice calm despite the thunder of her heart. "Get to the evacuation points. Get everyone you can find to safety." "What about you?" one of the security officers asked. "I'm going to buy you time." She walked toward the monster. The creature should have attacked immediately, should have torn through her in seconds and continued its rampage through the station, but it hesitated because somewhere in whatever passed for its mind, it remembered what humans had done to its kind in the thin places of Earth, in the bloody dawns of 100 battlefields, in the fire and the screaming and the relentless stubborn refusal to stop fighting. Sarah used that hesitation. She fired everything she had at its central mass, driving it back, making it focus on her instead of the fleeing survivors. The wraith screamed its rage and came for her, and the battle began in earnest. She fought through corridors that were never designed for combat, using the environment against the creature, collapsing sections of ceiling to slow it down, leading it away from populated areas step by bloody step. Her ammunition ran out. She picked up fallen weapons from dead security officers and kept fighting. Those ran out till she found maintenance tools and improvised explosives, and anything else that could hurt or slow or distract the creature tore through her defenses. One by one it caught her with a glancing blow that cracked ribs and sent her tumbling through a wall. She got back up. It cornered her in a dead-end corridor, and she stabbed it with a piece of broken rebar until it released her. 11 minutes. She held that corridor for 11 minutes, alone against something that should have killed her in seconds. her body breaking down piece by piece while the evacuation continued behind her when Earth's Frontier Defense Corps finally arrived, responding to an incursion that should have been impossible. They found Sarah standing over the dissolving corpse of the Category Ish was out of ammunition. Her left eye was swollen shut. 3 of her ribs were broken. She was holding a piece of bloody rebar like a spear. Did everyone get out? She asked. The rescue team leader stared at her for a long moment. Most of them, he said finally. You saved over 200 people. Sarah nodded once, and then her legs gave out and she collapsed into the arms of the soldiers who had come too late to help her fight in the medical bay. Hours later, Thessaly Verkith came to see her. The crystal being had lived for 3 centuries. He had studied 100 species. Across a dozen star systems, he had thought he understood what strength looked like. How? He asked, standing beside her bed, his voice soft with something that might have been awe. How do you fight like that? How do you face those things at dawn, every dawn, and still function? How do you walk toward monsters when everything in you must be screaming to run? Sarah looked at him with her one good eye. She thought about the question for a long time. Because someone has to, she said finally. And we are the ones who can. Thessaly did not have an answer for that. He stayed with her until she fell asleep. He thought about what it meant to burn so bright and so brief and so impossibly brave.